I think, well, one of the things, moving on to a point you make about education in the book, one thing that I wasn't sure about was the idea that teachers should be able to give their opinions to their students. And the reason I'm a bit unsure about it is because I remember when I was in high school and I was quite susceptible to, say, if there's a teacher I respected and he said something or she said something, I would take that as gospel. I would take it. I respect that person. They wouldn't mislead me, and that's how it must be. And the fact that I'm 25 now, and I've genuinely only in the last maybe 2 years, I think I've just started to think for myself.
Yeah.
I would watch people I really like, and if whatever they said, well, he said it, I like him, it must be true. Whereas now I'm only just starting to learn that people I like, I don't have to agree with everything they say. There's a lot I disagree with about
Right.
them. And I'm probably going to go on a tangent here, but this is the idea I have with Joe Rogan, for example. A lot, like if I say I really like Joe Rogan and I listen to him all the time, people will always say, "Well, what about this that he said and this?" I'm like, "Well, I don't agree with everything he says, but I still love listening to him and thinking about what he says. He's great at what he does." And I think people are they're so they get so annoyed at someone if they just say one thing they disagree with, and then they just shut them off. They'll never listen to them
Oh,
again.
and when I agreed to go on Joe Rogan, you should have seen some of the shit I took from saying,
I can imagine.
because again, they trotted out some bad things he said. And it says, has he said some both, let's just say, inaccurate and offensive things? He has, you know. But again, I don't think that's a reason not to go on Joe Rogan. Like, that doesn't make me complicit with everything he said. I mean, given how much airtime the guy has, how could you agree with everything he said? I mean, it would be weird and I think problematic if you
Yeah.
did. Like, you would be a martinet. But to get to the thrust of your question, look, this one's complicated too. And you know what you're describing is the danger of indoctrination, and that's real, right? You're the adult in the room. Um, you're evaluating these people. You're grading them. You have enormous influence over them, right? And to be clear, I think every teacher should be aware of that. And no teacher should ever be enjoined to say what they think, right? But I do think they should have the right to say what they think, depending on their professional judgment, for a number of reasons. The first one is they're political actors, right? They live in the world. I think in some ways it's quite disingenuous for teachers to pretend that they're these like Olympian figures that stand above the fray. They're not. Um, I also think it's important for them to model a certain kind of political dialogue and political discourse with their students. Alexander Michaeljohn, who was an American civil libertarian in the first half of the 20th century, he actually thought teachers should say what they think all the time. I don't think so. I think it should be up to them. But his argument's really important. His famous aphorism was, slaves can't teach freedom. If what you're trying to model is a certain kind of political discourse, how can you bite your tongue, right? How can you demonstrate what politics is if you're pretending you're above it? So I do think teachers should be allowed, again, not enjoined, but allowed to give their opinion. But, and this is the huge but, when they do so, they must make it absolutely clear that it is just their opinion and the other people in the room aren't enjoined to share it. And kids get that when you're honest about it. They say, look, what I'm telling you is not the gospel, right? To use your term,
Yeah.
right? It's my own political view because I live in the political world just like you do. I'm not going to try to disguise that, but I'm also not going to impose my political views on you, right? My job is to help you come to your own informed opinion. All right. And I think teachers should be allowed to disclose or not in the service of that, right? Depending on the situation and depending on their professional judgment, which we should respect.
Well, I think with that in mind, I think also in education, certainly in the UK, probably in the US as well, something that needs to be taught in high school and, well, middle school and where you are, is critical thinking and debate. I think so much of education in before students go to university is learning through textbooks and learning through exams and assessments, and none of it is conversation and here's what I think and then debating it
Right.
out. I think that's maybe also, if teachers are going to give their opinion, students should be encouraged to come back at them with something, or and there should be a lively sort of debate and teach how to do that properly.
Well, of course, because it's not natural, right? You don't come out of the womb saying, well, I'm going to listen
Yeah.
to what you say and consider it carefully and not kill you. I mean, if some of the evolutionary psychologists are right, it's actually the opposite. We're sort of programmed to hate on each other,
Yeah.
right? And that's precisely why schools have to intervene in that, right? Because the kids are coming up in a media environment where they don't see this demonstrated. So sometimes Susan and I, my wife and I, will be watching on TV and they'll say, okay, after we sell you something, we're going to have a debate, about whatever, healthcare or, Israel, whatever. And then you'll just see these sort of sequential rants by people. And we'll look at each other and we'll say, was that a debate? And of course it wasn't. It was sequential rants. And I think that, you look at what's on the internet, which is really where people are getting their stuff, and it's a million sequential rants. And the really scary thing, Gregor, to think about is that we're now raising a generation that thinks that's what politics is. Politics is sequential and mutually dismissive and hostile rants. That's what they see. So the only way that changes is through school. I mean, there is no other solution, right? Of course, we should try to alter these mediums, and there have been efforts at that. But school is still the major institution that we use to create citizens, right? To socialize our young. And unless they see something else, unless they see a different model demonstrated and practiced in schools, none of this is going to change.